Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, on a slightly gray Thursday afternoon, second week of January 2025. Last night's video I said February. In my defense, I'm a February baby. One viewer was kind enough to tell me I was wrong, and I appreciate that. Today, working on the 377 small block, just working on the fine details to almost call it finished. And today's project is to get a fuel line from the fuel pump, which is probably out of your line of sight, up to the carburetor. This is not the carburetor I'm probably going to use, so everything will just be finger tight for now, but we still need to get from there to here. Got a quick flashback. The summer I graduated high school, my first tunnel ram on a 454, 70 Chevelle SS 454. Sounds like a great car. It was a $700 car I bought at a used car lot out behind with no motor in it, no transmission. And the 10-bolt rear end, the 12-bolt was stolen, had a 10-bolt in it. So, and it was pretty rough. So if that sets the scene, but a year later I've done a lot of work to it. Started with a 350 Chevy, and then I finally found a 70 454 out of Monte Carlo, oval port. You know, nothing fancy, but hey, it was awesome for me at the time. And I bought my first tunnel ram brand new, a pair of 600 Hollies, because I could not wait to have dual carbs on something. And I plumbed it up the best I knew how, which was rubber fuel line, brass fittings, and hose clamps. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure I did my best job, but my brother took a look at it. He's 10 plus years my senior and had much more skills. He has taught me a lot how to do things correctly. He showed up after work. He worked as a truck mechanic at the time, heavy truck mechanic, with a box of fittings. And in about 2 hours, we removed my abomination, and from the fuel pump to both carburetors, including a nice spin-on filter, we had all mechanical fittings. He had used reusable hose. He had to put the hose ends on, like air brake stuff. It was fantastic. It looked fantastic. And from that day forward, on the pressure side of anything, you will not find me putting a hose clamp, period. With a few exceptions we'll have to talk about. But so for this project, you'll see I have a red cap on it, but on the suction side of this Carter fuel pump, mechanical fuel pump, I have a 3/8 nipple for 3/8 fuel line. For the suction side, it'll have a short connection to the line running back. Probably, I do have hardline connections to -6. I don't have one right with me, but it's a ferrule type arrangement that goes over a piece of like 3/8 brake line. You tighten it up. It's a compression fitting, and then you have a 6AN fitting on the other side. And I could change that fitting because the beauty of the Carter fuel pump is it has pipe thread. So you can put fittings in it. You know, thread in pipe fittings. Mechanical connections, far superior to anything else. I'm looking around for stuff. And there are many ways to accomplish the task. Today we're going to use push lock hose. This stuff became really popular. It's faded back out again now, I think, but 10 or 15 years ago, I was curious about it. And when I plumbed the LS swap in my Dodge pickup, I used push lock hose. It's not the stuff we're using today. The fittings are very similar. The first fitting I put on, I was up on a ladder under the hood. I'd already strung the hose front to back, and I pushed the fitting in by hand. It wasn't easy. The rest of the truck, I warmed it up with a heat gun, electric heat gun, and pushed them together. Neither one of those methods are probably the best, and now I've done more reading. It's been on the truck 8 years at 59 pounds of fuel pressure with zero trouble. That line should be clamped, and once again, I won't use a hose clamp. If I was to use a hose clamp, it would be an EFI style clamp that's smooth on the inside so you're not cutting the rubber. I prefer crimp clamp. So if I was to do an EFI setup with push lock hose today, probably not going to, I would put a clamp over it. NHRA says over 10 pounds of fuel pressure, or any pressure, you have to put a clamp on the outside of a push lock. But push locks are acceptable. They're one step up from a hose clamp, but at least it's not a hose clamp. What I don't like about worm-style hose clamps is the worm bites into the rubber, and over time, depending on what's in the line, it's gonna fail, catch fire, etc. The push lock hose itself, that's buyer beware. Last night, I just typed in push lock hose. I think Speedway Motors popped up. Their stuff's rated for fuel and other things. Summit popped up. Their hose is rated for fuel and other things. Jegs popped up. Their hose is not rated for fuel, nitrous, oil, power steer, the whole list of stuff. It's basically, you could put clear water in it, and that's about it. So you got to be careful when you're buying hose. They got it listed right next to the fittings. If you didn't read the fine print, that's a recipe for a disaster. With all that behind us, and this being, I hesitate to call it a budget build, but I'm trying to use things I have on property. This carburetor is not the forever carburetor. It's just finger tight, and everything I do is going to be finger tight. I might have mentioned that already. So I had this fuel line. We're trying to avoid hose clamps. I want all threaded connections. I have this fuel line. It's only 5/16, but it has an 1/8 pipe connection, and I have a 1/8 pipe to -6 adapter, which surprisingly is not a lot of restriction like you'd think it would be. The hole in and a hole out is pretty much the same size. At this point in the fuel delivery system, once you're at the carburetor, the needle and seat is not very big. So this could still probably overwhelm it. I guess the deal is to get ample fuel to here and let the carburetor decide what it needs. So this line is 5/16 flare into the carburetor. I have boxes of AN adapters for Holley carburetor, the different style bowls, the side hung, the center hung. You think I would have, and somewhere I probably do, have boxes and boxes of the stock Holley adapters. Well, these come in 5/16 like I need, and 3/8. I found a pair of 3/8 flare, inverted flare, like a brake line, but I only had one, and I cleaned it up. So I had to suck it up and buy 2 of them for almost 20 bucks. You can buy a whole fuel log for starting at $30, but I wanted to use this, so it comes with a metal/rubber gasket for the bowl. I almost prefer the nylon, but for today, we have 2 of these sitting right here, and that's what we're going to use. That takes a 1-inch wrench. Now, you see me looking at the gasket. One side's flat, one side's bulged up. I put the bulged up side against the bowl. That's just the way I am. Right or wrong, I'm going to at least do them both the same. And again, that would take a 1-inch wrench. We'll just go finger tight for today. The fuel line, I don't know if it's going to need a little tweaking or not. We'll just keep going live. I've stuck the fitting in here, which needs to be installed for real. Try not to block you. This line's been sitting around for a long time. I think she's going to fit though. Yep, went right on. That's not bad. That's a nice hard connection. So is that. It has a slight tweak to it that I couldn't straighten out, but I kind of think I have to go that way anyway, so as long as I don't dislike the angles, I hope we're still going here. Next I got, now we're into the push lock fitting stuff. A 45, excuse me, a 90, what am I saying? 45 would only be half that. 90 degree, right on there, and now we're headed down the right way. There's a gap between the alternator and the cylinder head and the water pump. I will be putting a thermal sleeve in that area. I have them, might as well. Now for the fuel pump end, we need 1/4 inch by -6 because the Carter pump I know I'm out of your view here, but it has a 1/4 inch connection right there. It might not be out of view, I hope not. I'll double check. If not, I'll grab the camera and show you. Now I have a -6 female 90-degree double female. I'm going to put that there. So that'll make a nice solid connection for the fuel filter. These are $15, $20 online. They do come apart. They have an O-ring, nothing but a screen inside. The screen seems to be halfway. They're not marked for flow. That makes you want to put the threaded connection up with the O-ring. I guess maybe I would notice it more if it was leaking. We're going to put that on there. Now we're pointed in the right direction on both ends. Now we need a hose and a tape measure to measure said hose. So, to be super accurate, let's put the fitting on there. No sense making it tight like a guitar string or sloppy loose. So, excuse me for a second. I'm going to go straight right there. Now, we can accurately, I'd say 12 inches is going to do it. So, as I mentioned, I put them on by hand and then using a heat gun to warm the hose up a little bit by hand. And then I got crazy one day and bought the tool to actually assemble them. So, let's go out on the bench and assemble the hose. Here we go so far up close. These red fittings are temporary. I got to get some black ones. Okay, we'll focus on the tool. The hose I chose, the package was open. This is probably a fitting I practiced on. It was sitting around in the outside protection coating is kind of frayed, but I'm going to cover it with heat shield, I guess, anyway, so we'll run it. Why waste a fitting? So, it's color-coded adapters. This is a Kool tool. That's KOUL-tools. Pretty simple. You got a clamp for the hose. Orange means -6. If you had a straight fitting, it pops onto that little rig there. We already have the straight installed, so for the angled fitting, you just put it in there like that. So it'll push on it. As far as clamping the hose, you want to be longer than the distance from here to here in the vise. So you can crank it back. I'm not going to put lube on or anything, but if you did, it'd probably make it easier. You can guide the hose with your hand, so I'm going to pull that back a little more. I know it's going to bunch up and whatnot, so I'll try clamping right there. You got to clamp it pretty tight. And most of the way it'll go by hand. You can move this fitting too if you need to help it on there. I'm just turning the crank by hand. I hope you can see that. At this point I want to guide it under the little sleeve there. So it's not frayed or anything too bad. Go there. I'm just bunching up the sleeve now, so I can go ahead and release. Let it relax. Did a pretty good job. Makes me wish this one hadn't been sitting around. I don't like the fraying. The hose I put on the Dodge didn't have covering on it. It was just really good hose. The hose is rated for, depending on the brand, 200 or 300 PSI. Again, a non-clamped fitting is only good for 10 pounds, NHRA rules anyway. So there we have that. Of course, I'm still going to clean it out. I cut it with my tool that I cut the wire braided stuff even, so I use the same tool to cut the heat shrink. I mean the heat tape. Let me show you what it is. I'll cut it to length and shove it over the whole thing. This is just this thermal zero, probably some junk I bought on eBay. I'll cut it long enough to cover my ugly fraying problem. And it's gonna be a little difficult. Have to shove the straight end through, but I'll be back in a flash. That stuff just cut with a pair of scissors. Wasn't too difficult to shove through there. Got one little piece I'll trim off there, but at least it provides some thermal protection and makes an ugly hose not quite so ugly. Let's go put it on. All right, that was a fun little project. One step closer to calling this project done. One step closer to ready to run anyway. I'm not trying to rhyme, it just happened. Obviously I have to take it apart and put liquid Teflon on the threads, not tape. Tape on the fuel line. Might end up in the bowl. Use the liquid stuff. Probably gonna be okay. Remember, pipe thread seals on the threads, not by bottoming out the fitting. So when it feels tight, it is. I had to buy, I used to have tons of these, probably threw them away. It's a stock style coil bracket. I didn't want a cheap chrome one or anything, so I bought a nice little black one. Bought a pair of them actually. There's 2 holes in the back of my manifold where the stock coil would go. I have the MSD blaster I'm going to mount right there with my coil wire. So that'll be, again, one step closer to being finished. I got to get some black plugs for the the water pump and the manifold. I guess one of these is probably going to have a coolant sensor or in the cylinder head, I'm not sure. Probably cap off the manifold. I have a 750 Holly I'm going to rebuild and put on here. I believe this is an 850, which wouldn't be a bad choice. So there'll probably one more video. We'll finish up all the small things and actually recap all the details of this project. Why I think it'll be a good combination, despite the fact it is all parts I collected. My brother started the project, the short block, and then I took it from there with junk that I had, basically. Good stuff. We'll recap that in the future. Hey, you have a nice afternoon, and I'll talk to you soon.